You think you can show up at my daughter's wedding in that suit, old man? Brad sneered as he glanced down his nose at me, barely hiding the smirk. He signaled to the security guards hovering near the ballroom entrance, waving a dismissive hand. Please escort this gentleman out. We can't have him running the photos, he said, just loud enough for the other guests to catch his disdain. The guards froze, exchanging wary glances. One leaned toward the other and whispered, That's Frank Carter. He's a VIP. Don't mess with him. For a moment, the grand hall at the Westchester Plaza was so quiet you could hear the faint clink of crystal glasses. Everyone seemed to pause, waiting for the next act of the unfolding family drama. Honestly, Brad, where'd you dig up that suit? Out of a discount bin at Goodwill? His words landed right as I took a sip of water, making me stop mid-motion, the glass halfway to my lips. I'd entered my daughter Emily's new home in Rye just 10 minutes earlier, expecting some awkward small talk with her fiancé and his wealthy family. Instead, I found myself in the center of an interrogation about my wardrobe. Emily bustled in from the kitchen, carrying a tray of homemade appetizers, her eyes darting between Brad and me. Dad, your suit is fine, she snapped, setting the tray down with a little more force than necessary. But Brad wouldn't let it go. Look, sweetheart, I'm just being honest. Your father seems like a nice guy, but in our world, appearance is everything. People will be looking at those photos for decades, you know. His cold gaze swept over me like an auctioneer judging a piece of scratched-up furniture. Outside the big window, Westchester's manicured lawns and old stone fences gleamed in the afternoon sun, a far cry from the modest street in Yonkers where I spent my childhood. My navy blue suit, bought at a Macy's sale for $120, had seen me through 3 decades of city council meetings and countless neighborhood weddings. Suddenly, it felt like a Halloween costume. This suit is just fine for any formal occasion, I answered, keeping my tone even. I could feel the tension building in my chest, but I was determined not to give Brad the satisfaction of seeing me flustered. He laughed, that kind of brittle laugh you only hear from people who think they'll never have to pay for their cruelty. Maybe it's fine for your work in, city government. But in our circle, you need to step it up. Private equity, tech moguls, old New England money, first impressions are everything. Emily's hands tightened around a napkin. Dad's suit is just fine, Brad. Can we drop this? He kept pushing, voice sliding into patronizing territory. Frank, not everyone can afford a bespoke suit. But surely, for your only daughter's wedding, you could have borrowed something nicer, maybe asked Emily for help. I'm sure she'd have found you something. His words hung in the air. I'd spent most of my career as a district judge in Brooklyn, and I'd seen men try to humiliate others just to feel powerful. Still, I was surprised by how deeply Brad's little jabs cut, not because of the suit, but because he thought this was how you measured a man. Maybe you should get to know me instead of judging by my suit, I said. I saw a flicker in his eyes, amusement, or maybe annoyance at being challenged. Oh, but the two are related, Frank. A man's clothes show you everything about his priorities, his status, his worth. He drained his wineglass, feeling bolder with every sip. Emily told me you work for the city, some kind of admin job? The words dropped like stones into the silence. Emily's jaw clenched. She'd kept my actual job, retired judge, quiet for years, after too many run-ins with opportunists and relatives asking for favors. She told Brad only the bare minimum. He, of course, assumed the rest. Something like that, I replied. It's steady work. Brad's tone turned falsely generous. Well, good for you. Not everyone needs to chase big money. Actually, you know what? I'll handle the wedding costs. All of it. He reached over and patted my hand like he was bestowing a favor on a street beggar. No need for you to stress over money. Consider it a gift to Emily, so her day isn't ruined by limitations. The dining room fell quiet, except for the steady tick of the antique clock on the mantel. Emily's eyes glistened with frustration and shame. Brad leaned back, looking far too pleased with himself, expecting a grateful thank you. Instead, something hardened inside me. It wasn't anger, at least, not the sort that boils over. It was a cold, clear sense of who I was dealing with. The same recognition I'd had 100 times on the bench, when the mask slipped and you saw a person's real character. That's very generous, I said quietly, refusing to give him the drama he wanted. Emily stood so suddenly her chair scraped across the hardwood. Brad, I think you should go. He blinked, surprised. What? We're just. No, Emily said, her voice sharp enough to cut through his confusion. You've had too much to drink, and you're being disrespectful to my father. Brad grumbled, made a show of standing, grabbed his expensive jacket, and stomped toward the door. You can't ignore these things, Emily. These differences matter. Emily followed, her voice low and urgent as they disappeared into the hallway. The front door slammed, leaving me and my daughter in the sudden hush. Emily came back, her shoulders drooped, her confidence replaced by uncertainty. Dad, I'm so sorry. He's not usually like this. The stress, the wine. I reached for her hand. You don't have to explain. These things take time. Getting to know people. Seeing who they really are. She looked up at me, searching my face for signs of anger or disappointment. I just smiled softly. Tomorrow is a new day. We'll see what it brings. And as I left Emily's house that night, the autumn air cool against my skin, I wondered what Brad's next move would be, and how much more of the real man would show as the wedding day crept closer. The following morning dawned gray and chilly, typical for early spring in Westchester. I sat at my kitchen table, old habits running strong, black coffee in my favorite Yankees mug, the newspaper folded to the crossword. The silence of my house felt heavier than usual. Even after all these years, I could still picture my late wife, Martha, shuffling in, making her gentle jokes about my judge face, and fussing over breakfast. But yesterday's dinner wouldn't leave my mind. I could see Brad's sneer, the glint in his eye, and the way Emily's hands shook as she cleared the dishes. I'd seen arrogance before, but it was different when it was aimed at you, or your family. I was halfway through the crossword when my phone rang. The caller ID read, Emily. I smiled as I picked up. Morning, sweetheart. Dad, did you get home all right last night? Her voice sounded small, apologetic. I didn't want to leave things like that. I'm fine, Emmy. Got home, made some tea, even finished the crossword. And you? She hesitated. Brad tried to call after he got home. Left 3 voicemails. He kept saying he was sorry if he embarrassed anyone, but he still thinks you should try to, blend in more with his family's expectations. I could hear the strain in her voice. Emily had always been a peacemaker, even as a little girl, always wanting everyone to get along. Em, I said gently. I've spent most of my life not blending in. It's worked out fine so far. She laughed, the sound like a bomb. I know, Dad. I just want the wedding to be perfect. I told her not to worry about me, that she should focus on enjoying her engagement. We talked a little longer, about the caterer, her dress, how her best friend Jessica was flying in from Chicago for the big day. When we hung up, I felt both reassured and more worried than ever. Brad was going to be a problem. After lunch, I took a drive to the Bronx to check in on my old friend Joe. We'd met on the bench decades ago, back when we both still had brown hair and bigger dreams. Joe always gave good advice, straight, honest, and a little gruff. He greeted me with a bear hug and a mug of strong coffee. Heard your daughter's getting married. Mazel tov. But you got that troubles coming look, Frank. I filled him in, from Brad's snide comments to the not-so-subtle threats about the wedding. Joe whistled. I've seen the type. Think money makes them kings. Let me guess, his family's loaded? Yeah, Tech money. His dad's some startup exec, his mom runs charity galas. The whole package. Joe sipped his coffee. You know what they hate most? People who can't be bought or intimidated. Brad thinks he's running the show, but he doesn't know you. I smiled. Maybe not, but he's trying. He even threatened to bar me from the wedding if I didn't dress up to his standards. Joe laughed so hard he almost spilled his coffee. What did you say? I told him I'd be wearing the suit I own. It's good enough for me. But honestly, Joe, it's not about the suit. It's about control. He leaned back, nodding. You ever think about telling Emily what you really did for a living? I shook my head. She asked me to keep it quiet. She wants a normal life, not a judge for a father-in-law. Joe grunted. Normal went out the window the minute she met that kid. Just watch yourself. Guys like Brad, they only get nastier when they don't get their way. After I left Joe's, I stopped at the florist, ordered Martha's favorite flowers for her grave. Daffodils and tulips, a reminder of better springs. I stood at the cemetery, hands in my pockets, the March wind stinging my face. I could use your advice, Martha, I murmured. Emily's in over her head, and I can't fix it with a ruling from the bench. Of course, the world kept turning. In the days that followed, wedding preparations rolled on. Emily texted photos of table settings, invitations, cakes. I played the part of the excited father, but inside, I was keeping score. Every conversation with Brad became a chess game, polite words hiding deeper motives. Then, on Saturday morning, the phone rang again. This time it was Brad. He sounded more sober, more cautious, but just as condescending. Frank, I wanted to apologize for the other night. I may have been a little harsh about the suit, but I'm just trying to make sure the wedding goes smoothly. You know, appearances really do matter in our circles. I let him talk. He rambled on about guests flying in from Boston and San Francisco, about how every detail reflected on his family's reputation. Emily deserves a perfect day, he finished, and I hope you'll do your part to make sure it's not overshadowed by, unnecessary drama. I'll be there, Brad, I said. And I'll be wearing my own suit. There was a long pause. Well, I hope you reconsider. But if not, just know there are standards to uphold. The call ended, but the real conversation had only just begun. Brad was upping the stakes. And I quietly was making my own plans. The days leading up to the wedding slipped by with a strange tension, like waiting for a summer storm. Emily called less often, her voice sounding rushed, distracted by flower arrangements and last-minute seating changes. Brad, for his part, kept his distance, but every now and then I'd get a text. Don't forget the suit situation, Frank. Or, let's keep everything classy for Emily's sake. On a rainy Wednesday afternoon, I decided to walk around the neighborhood, just to clear my head. The small brick houses on my block had seen generations come and go. Most of my neighbors were younger now, families with noisy kids, people heading into the city every morning. But old habits die hard, and I always stopped at the corner diner for a slice of cherry pie. Sandy, the waitress, noticed my mood. You look like a man with worries, Mr. Carter. Pie on the house? I smiled, grateful for the small kindness. My daughter's wedding is almost here. You'd think after a lifetime on the bench, family drama wouldn't get to me. She laughed. You know what my grandma used to say? Nothing gets messy like a wedding. Or an inheritance. Or a kitchen with too many cooks. I thanked her, and as I walked home with pie in a paper box, I realized how right she was. Family brings out the best and worst in people, especially when money and pride are at stake. Later that night, as I sat in my study surrounded by old case files and Martha's framed cross-stitch on the wall, my phone rang again. This time it was Emily, her voice trembling. Dad, Brad says if you show up at the wedding in that suit, the hotel won't let you in. He says it's in the contract with the venue. Is that true? I took a steadying breath. Emily, don't let Brad's threats get to you. You picked the venue, right? Yes. The dress code says formal attire. That's all. No mention of brands, no rules about price tags. That's what I thought, I said quietly. She was silent for a moment. I just want everyone to get along, Dad. I want you there. Please. I'll be there. I promise. I tried to sound more certain than I felt. After we hung up, I sat in the quiet, thinking about all the people I'd watched over the years. People who used rules as weapons, people who thought their money could change the world. The lesson was always the same: real respect isn't bought, it's earned. That Friday, I drove to the Westchester Plaza to get a feel for the place. The hotel lobby was all marble floors and giant potted palms, the kind of place where valets in red jackets opened the doors with a little too much flourish. I wandered around, quietly noting the exits, the locations of the ballroom and garden, and even introduced myself to the head of security, a sturdy man named Victor Jones. He shook my hand with a firm grip. You must be Emily's father. She's talked about you. I smiled. Only the good parts, I hope. Victor grinned. Don't worry, Mr. Carter. We're used to big events. Everything will go smoothly. I walked the halls, picturing the ceremony, the reception, all the faces I'd soon see gathered under one roof: friends, family, strangers, and of course, Brad's polished parents. By the time I left, I felt a little better. Maybe Brad was just blustering, a man trying to control too much. Back at home, I found a heavy cream envelope in my mailbox. It was the formal invitation, all gold embossing and elegant script. Mr. and Mrs. Bradley Kingsley request the honor of your presence. The names glittered, but my own was there, tucked in at the bottom. Frank Carter, father of the bride. I put the invitation on my fridge with a magnet and made a decision. I would wear my navy suit, polished shoes, and the tie Martha had given me for my retirement party. That would be enough. The night before the wedding, Emily called one last time. Her voice was tired but hopeful. Dad, I can't wait to see you tomorrow. I know it's been stressful, but it'll all be worth it. Sleep well, Emmy. I'll be there bright and early. That night, as I hung my suit on the closet door and laid out my cufflinks, I remembered every time Martha had reassured me before a tough day in court. Just be yourself, Frank. That's always enough. The house was quiet, the air thick with the sense that everything was about to change. Tomorrow, I'd step into a room full of people who didn't know me, or thought they did. But I would stand tall, for Emily, for Martha, and for myself. I didn't need my alarm to wake me on the morning of Emily's wedding. I was up before dawn, nerves tingling the way they had before big verdicts. The spring sunlight crept through the window, painting golden bars across my bedroom floor. I sat on the edge of the bed, looking at the suit, navy, pressed and ready, a modest badge of all my years. My hands were steady as I shaved and buttoned my shirt, even if my mind kept spinning back through the last month. Brad's ultimatums, Emily's anxious calls, all the quiet disappointments of a father who wanted only happiness for his girl. Breakfast was toast and black coffee, but I barely tasted a thing. The street outside was hushed, dew sparkling on every lawn. I paused at the old family photo in the hallway, Martha with her patient smile, Emily as a beaming kid on my shoulders. You'd be proud of her today, Martha, I whispered. And I'll do my best. The drive to Westchester Plaza was a blur. I parked far from the entrance, not out of embarrassment, but habit. The lot was already filling with luxury SUVs and polished town cars. People in tuxedos and gowns glided toward the entrance, their laughter and chatter rising in the crisp air. Inside, everything shimmered. The hotel staff moved with orchestrated grace. A pianist played something soft and sweet in the lobby. I nodded to the concierge, adjusted my tie, and headed for the ballroom. Mr. Carter. Victor, the security chief, greeted me with a smile and a handshake. Good to see you. Congratulations. Thank you, Victor. I'm just here to make my daughter proud. The ballroom was a riot of white roses, silver ribbons, and sparkling chandeliers. Guests mingled in little groups, glasses of champagne already in hand. I caught glimpses of Emily's friends from college, Brad's colleagues in sharp suits, and clusters of family on both sides. My eyes searched for Emily, but she was nowhere in sight. Instead, Brad's mother, a tall woman in a designer dress, spotted me first. Frank, how wonderful you could join us, she said, her voice polite but chilly. We're so glad you decided to make an effort. I smiled, letting her words slide past. Wouldn't miss it for the world. Brad appeared moments later, his tuxedo crisp, hair slicked just so. He gave me a once-over, a flicker of annoyance crossing his face when he saw my suit. Frank, I see you decided to stick with your old favorite. I did, I replied calm as ever. It's a lucky suit. Never failed me yet. He leaned closer, dropping his voice. I warned you. My family expects a certain standard. I'm here for Emily. Not for the show, I said, looking him straight in the eye. And I won't cause trouble. But I won't be bullied either. He scoffed. Don't make a scene, Frank. Today's not about you. Agreed. It's about my daughter. So let's keep it that way. Before Brad could reply, there was a flurry of movement at the ballroom doors. Emily, radiant in white, her hair swept up and her eyes bright with hope and nerves. When she saw me, she rushed over, all the tension falling away in her smile. Dad! You look great. She hugged me tightly. I'm so glad you're here. I held her close, fighting back tears. You're beautiful, Em. Your mom would be so proud. We stood together, just for a moment, in our own little world. Then the wedding planner called her away and the machinery of the day rolled forward, guests seated, musicians tuning, the energy in the room rising. The ceremony itself felt like a dream. I watched Emily walk down the aisle on Brad's arm, her smile dazzling, the guests sighing with delight. The vows were said, the rings exchanged. I blinked and it was over. Applause, cheers, the first kiss. My girl was a wife now. But as we moved to the reception, the air shifted. Brad's father, a silver-haired businessman, made a pointed toast about striving for excellence in all things, even appearances. Brad's friends made subtle jokes about old-fashioned traditions. I felt the stares, the sidelong glances at my suit. But I refused to shrink. I danced with Emily, held her tight as the band played our old favorite, Stand By Me. For a moment, it was just us, father and daughter, the world and its judgments falling away. But as the evening wore on, Brad seemed to grow more agitated, whispering with his parents, casting dark glances my way. I saw him talking to Victor, the security chief, gesturing toward me. I braced myself, heart pounding. Was he really going to try and have me thrown out? Would he dare? But Victor approached with an apologetic look. Mr. Carter, may I have a word? We stepped aside. Victor lowered his voice. Brad's requested you leave. Says it's for the best. I squared my shoulders. And what do you say, Victor? He hesitated, then shook his head. I say you're welcome here. My team knows it. Don't worry, Mr. Carter. We've got your back. Relief and gratitude rushed through me. Thank you, Victor. Back at my table, I watched the crowd swirl, money and ambition, pride and pretense. But at the center, I saw Emily's happiness, and I held on to that. Brad might have tried to humiliate me. His family might have whispered behind their hands. But I'd kept my dignity, and my promise to Emily. And deep down, I knew, the real measure of a man isn't in his suit, but in his love, his backbone, and his willingness to stand up for what's right. The reception rolled on with speeches, laughter, and 100 little moments that Emily would remember for a lifetime. But beneath the music and toasts, a current of unease ran just out of sight. I caught snippets of whispered conversations, sidelong glances, and the cold, tight smiles of Brad's parents when they thought I wasn't looking. The dinner was served with all the expected ceremony, waiters gliding from table to table, trays held high. But when the cake was brought out, Brad raised his glass and tapped it for attention. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, all charm, "I'd like to thank everyone for joining us, especially my beautiful wife, Emily, and her father, Frank, for making this a day to remember." He paused, letting the crowd's applause settle. His eyes, however, were sharp as knives when he turned to me. "In our family, we believe in certain standards. And sometimes it takes courage to rise to the occasion, even when it's uncomfortable. So, Dad, I hope you know how much it means to Emily that you made the effort tonight." His words dripped with mock sincerity. I felt the eyes of the room shift toward me, some faces confused, others amused. I met Brad's gaze, refusing to flinch. Emily, flustered, cut in. "What matters is that we're all together, Brad. That's all I ever wanted." She looked at me, her eyes shining with gratitude and apology all at once. The band started up again, and people drifted back to the dance floor. I stood, excusing myself, and stepped out onto the hotel's garden terrace. The air was cool, stars pricking the darkening sky. I needed a moment alone to gather myself. I didn't expect company. But a minute later, Brad followed me outside, his footsteps echoing across the stone patio. "You're quite the actor, Frank," he said, lowering his voice. "Smiling for the cameras, pretending you belong. But you and I both know you're out of your league." I turned to face him, keeping my voice even. "You married my daughter. That makes us family, Brad. Maybe it's time you learned what that really means." He laughed, the sound hollow. "Family? You think you get to define that? My parents built everything I have. You worked a city job? Wore the same suit for 20 years. You can't possibly understand what's at stake here." I shook my head. "You keep talking about money, Brad. But Emily needs kindness, loyalty, and respect. Things no amount of money can buy." His jaw tightened. "You're an embarrassment. I gave you every chance to step aside quietly. Don't make me regret showing mercy." A familiar calm washed over me, the old courtroom detachment. "Are you threatening me, Brad? Because if you are, you'd better be sure." He stepped closer, voice a whisper. "I'll do what's best for my wife. Even if that means keeping certain people out of her life. This is your last warning." I looked him square in the eye, unblinking. "You've made yourself clear. Now let me make myself clear. I'm not going anywhere. Not tonight, not ever. Emily's my daughter, and no one, not even her husband, gets to decide whether I'm worthy." He stared at me, anger flickering, then spun on his heel and stalked back inside. I leaned on the balcony rail, letting the tension bleed away into the night air. My thoughts drifted to Martha, her laughter, her faith in me, her quiet insistence that people always reveal themselves, Frank. You just have to watch long enough. Tonight, Brad had revealed himself in full. When I returned inside, I found Victor, the security chief, waiting for me near the entrance. He nodded respectfully. "Everything all right, Mr. Carter?" I smiled. "Better than all right, Victor. Thank you for having my back." The rest of the night passed in a blur of dances, family photos, and goodbyes. Emily hugged me tight as the evening ended, tears glistening in her eyes. "Thank you, Dad. For everything. You're my girl. Always," I whispered, holding her close. The hotel lobby was nearly empty by the time I grabbed my coat and stepped out into the early morning chill. My old sedan waited by the curb, a little battered, but steadfast and true. As I started the engine, I glanced back at the shining windows of the Westchester Plaza. So much glitter and show, but little warmth beneath. On the drive home, I felt a surprising peace settle in my chest. I had faced down Brad and his family's judgments. I hadn't stooped to their level or let anger win. I'd shown Emily the meaning of quiet strength, and I knew, deep down, that Martha would have been proud. But one thing was certain: Brad's words weren't an ending. They were a beginning. The real test of family was only just starting. In the days after the wedding, the world seemed quieter. The congratulatory phone calls faded, the flower arrangements wilted, and the only reminder of that glittering night was a row of cards on my kitchen table. Emily called me, her voice bright but tired, telling me how beautiful the honeymoon in Vermont was, how grateful she was that I'd been there. I could hear it in her words, a plea for things to be simple again, for family to stay close despite everything. I told her the truth. I was proud of her, always would be. But I also asked, as gently as I could, "Are you happy, Em? Really happy?" She hesitated. "Brad can be difficult, Dad. But he's ambitious. He wants the best for us, even if, well, sometimes he goes too far." I heard the shadow in her voice, the beginnings of doubt that only time and experience could answer. I didn't push. I'd learned long ago that a parent's job, once the kids are grown, is not to fix everything, but to stand ready when you're needed. As for Brad, I didn't hear from him at all. Not a call, not a message, not a thank you for attending the wedding. Silence. I wasn't surprised. Some men only reach out when they want something, and Brad had already made it clear what he wanted from me: compliance, quiet, and distance. But the old house didn't feel as empty as I expected. Instead, I found myself filling the days with small rituals. I tended Martha's roses, their bright yellow buds stubbornly pushing through the spring earth. I took longer walks through the park, greeting neighbors and strangers alike. Sometimes, I'd run into Joe from the Bronx, and we'd sit on a bench trading stories about judges, about grandkids, about stubborn sons-in-law who thought the world owed them something. Joe always made me laugh. "Frank," he'd say, "one thing I know about life: eventually, the truth comes out. You just have to wait for the right moment." One evening, I sat with an old scrapbook, flipping through pictures of Emily as a child, her first day of kindergarten, her piano recitals, her high school graduation. In every photo, I saw the same bright eyes, the same fierce joy. Brad didn't know that Emily, not really. He knew the woman shaped by ambition and hope, but not the little girl who used to climb into my lap and beg for one more story. That night I wrote her a letter. Not an email, not a text, but a real letter, pen on paper, the way Martha used to do. "Dear Emily, I want you to know that you were the brightest part of my life, every single day. I know things with Brad might be difficult, and I know you're trying to make everything work. Just remember, you deserve respect, kindness, and someone who sees the best in you, not just when you're in a white dress, but every day after. No matter what, I'm here for you. And I love you. Dad." I tucked the letter into an envelope and left it on her doorstep one morning, early, while the world was still asleep. I didn't want Brad to see me. This was just between father and daughter. Days slipped by. The phone rang less, but I felt lighter somehow. I'd done my duty, stood my ground, given my blessing, and spoken my truth. If Emily ever needed me, she'd know exactly where to find me. But then, a week after the wedding, there was a knock on my door just after dusk. I opened it to find Emily standing there, eyes red-rimmed, clutching my letter in her hand. "Dad," she whispered, "can I come in?" I nodded and led her to the kitchen, pouring tea the way Martha would have done. We sat in silence, steam rising between us, until she spoke. "Brad lost his temper tonight. Said I embarrassed him by talking to his friends about work. He called me names, Dad, names I've never heard from him before." My hands clenched around the mug, but I kept my voice steady. "Did he hurt you, Em?" She shook her head. "Not physically." But she choked on her words, tears slipping down her cheeks. I just kept thinking about what you said. About being respected. About being seen. I reached for her hand, holding it tight. You don't have to stay where you're not valued. Not for him. Not for anyone. She nodded, swallowing hard. I know. I needed to hear it from you. We sat together for a long time, letting the silence do what words sometimes can't. In that quiet, I realized something. All the battles, all the stubbornness, all the pride, it wasn't for show. It was for moments like this, when love was the only thing that really mattered. Emily left before midnight, a little stronger, a little surer. As I watched her car disappear into the night, I knew we were both ready for whatever came next. For all Brad's money and bluster, in the end, it was a simple truth that mattered. Family means standing by each other, especially when the world tries to pull you apart. And I, Frank Carter, would always be there for my girl. In the weeks that followed, life moved on in quiet, determined ways. Spring in Westchester unfolded in bursts of green and birdsong, but my house felt different, lighter somehow, as if all the old ghosts had finally been put to rest. I heard from Emily more often now. She'd come by with groceries, or just for coffee, telling me stories about her work, her dreams, and the little things she was rediscovering about herself. Sometimes she stayed for hours, her laughter filling the kitchen the way Martha's once did. Brad, for a while, kept his distance. He called Emily, sent her flowers, even wrote long, apologetic emails. But Emily stood her ground. She made it clear that she wouldn't tolerate disrespect, not from him, not from anyone. I'm learning, Dad, she told me once, smiling a little through her sadness. It's hard, but I'm learning how to speak up for myself. One afternoon, Emily arrived with a small suitcase and a weary smile. I'm going to stay here for a while, Dad. Brad and I need some space. Maybe a lot of space. She unpacked in her old room, settling back into the patterns of her childhood, books stacked on the nightstand, her favorite scarf hanging from the chair, a photo of Martha by the window. The house felt full again, not just with things, but with hope. We talked late into the night, sharing stories I'd never told her, about my first years on the bench, about Martha's kindness, about all the fears and failures I'd hidden behind a judge's calm. Emily listened, sometimes laughing, sometimes crying. She asked me if I ever felt like I didn't belong, and I told her the truth. Most days. But belonging isn't about what you wear or where you fit in. It's about who you love, and who loves you back. Slowly, Emily began to heal. She met with friends, picked up old hobbies, took long walks through the neighborhood. She even went to counseling, finding the words to untangle the knots left by Brad's control. And through it all, I watched her grow stronger, day by day, choice by choice. Brad showed up on my doorstep once, late on a Saturday morning. He stood on the porch in a sharp suit, looking older, tired, and less certain than I'd ever seen him. He asked to speak to Emily, but she refused. Instead, he and I sat together on the front steps, the silence heavy between us. I made a mess of things, Frank, he finally said. I thought I was helping her by setting standards. I thought I was helping you by trying to keep up appearances. I shook my head. You were helping yourself, Brad. You wanted everything your way. You forgot that real love means listening, not controlling. He stared at his hands. I don't know how to fix it. Maybe it's not yours to fix, I said. Sometimes you just have to let people grow on their own. He left quietly, and I watched his car disappear around the corner, unsure if I'd ever see him again. Part of me felt pity. Another part, relief. Months passed, and summer came. The roses Martha planted burst into bloom, their color a fierce, living reminder of the strength that had always held our family together. Emily found a new apartment nearby, with bright windows and space for a cat she'd always wanted. She invited me over for dinner, and we toasted with sparkling cider, laughing at her attempts at Martha's old recipes. Looking back, I saw the journey not as a series of wounds, but as a path of lessons, some bitter, some sweet. I'd learned that dignity isn't for sale, that love endures long after weddings and disappointments, and that being a parent means showing up, again and again, even when it's hard. On Emily's birthday, she invited friends and family to her new place. The house was filled with laughter, music, and the smells of homemade pie. As she blew out her candles, she looked across the room and caught my eye. For a moment, I saw not just my daughter, but the woman she'd become, strong, resilient, and unafraid to stand up for herself. Later that night, as the guests drifted home, Emily hugged me tight. "Thank you, Dad. For everything. For not giving up on me. For reminding me who I am." I kissed her forehead, feeling Martha's presence in the warmth of her embrace. "You never have to thank me, Em. That's what family's for." As I walked home beneath the summer stars, I felt at peace. Life, I knew, would bring more storms, more Brads, more moments of doubt, more challenges and joys. But whatever came, I would meet it with open eyes and a steady heart. Because love, real love, doesn't wear out or fade away. It simply grows stronger, one ordinary day at a time.